Hi, I'm Mr. McMillan and welcome to Edexcel GCSE RS Unit 10.2, Part 3. In this video we'll look at the Catholic understanding of Apostolic Succession and how this links to the roles of the Pope, the bishops and the Magisterium. The basis for the belief in Apostolic Succession can be found in the Gospels. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 16, Jesus questions his apostles about his own identity by asking, "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter responds by saying, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus praises Peter's declaration of faith and responds by making some remarkable statements about Peter's role in the church. He says, "Blessed are you, Simon, and I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." But what does this all mean? Well, firstly, it should be noted that the change of Simon's name to Peter was not accidental, but a play on words. The word Peter means rock in Greek. So according to the Catholic understanding, Peter was to be the rock or foundation on which the church was built. He was the first head of the church, and what Catholics would call the first pope, although this term wasn't used until later. Furthermore, Jesus symbolically gave Peter a set of keys, which is why the symbol of St. Peter and of the Vatican City, the home of the Pope, both have a set of keys. The symbolism of the keys has three main elements relating to the leadership that Jesus bestows upon Peter. Firstly, they represent authority. Keys are able to open and lock doors. A person with a set of keys has the authority or power to let people in or to keep them out, what the Bible would call the power to bind and loose. Peter is given the power to bind and loose, meaning to have authority or leadership over the church. Secondly, keys represent responsibility. When your parents give you a set of keys to the house while they go away for the night, you are responsible for looking after it, and hopefully not inviting all your friends to a party. So the Pope, along with the bishops, has the responsibility to protect, preserve, and pass on the teachings of Jesus. The third and final aspect of the symbolism of the keys is the idea that they were to be handed on. When a person passes a car to a new buyer, it is the keys that are handed over to complete the transaction. Catholics believe that the authority and responsibility given to Peter and the apostles was meant to be handed on. This process is what they call Apostolic Succession. The transfer of leadership has continued unbroken from the first head of the church, St. Peter, through to his successors and to the current head of the church, Pope Francis. So what is the importance of the Pope for Catholics? As we saw with the first Pope, St. Peter, being the head of the church includes both authority and responsibility. This authority and responsibility has been handed down to the current Pope. So what authority does the Pope have? The Pope is the Bishop of Rome, which makes him the overall leader or head of the Catholic Church. The Pope is sometimes known as the Vicar of Christ, and included in this title is the belief that the Pope has the authority to appoint, and also where necessary to remove, bishops and cardinals. We'll say more about cardinals later. He also has the authority to speak ex cathedra. This means to speak infallibly, or without error, on issues of doctrine. This doesn't mean everything he says is perfect, but rather means that in certain circumstances, when speaking on areas of doctrine, which is Catholic belief, he can infallibly define the official teachings of the Catholic Church. In reality, this happens very rarely, the last time being in 1950, although more on this in the next video. Finally, the Pope has the authority to lead the Magisterium, which we'll come back to later. So what responsibilities does the Pope have? He is responsible for directing and guiding the Church. He is seen as a global figurehead and ambassador for the Church. As has been seen since the election of Pope Francis in 2013, the Pope has an ability to impose his particular character on the Church and what it focuses on. In Francis's case, a focus on the needs of the poor. This is also why the Pope spends much time visiting the Church around the world, providing encouragement and direction through these visits and his writings to the whole Church. Connected to the idea of Apostolic Succession is the understanding of the role of the bishops. If St. Peter was the first Pope, then the apostles were the first bishops. The English word bishop is a translation of the Greek word episkope, which can be found in the New Testament meaning an overseer. This was someone who had authority and responsibility over an area or group of individual churches. Today, a bishop is an ordained priest selected to have oversight over an area of churches called a diocese. Bishops too, like the Pope, by virtue of apostolic succession, have both authority and responsibility. They are given the authority to ordain priests, and they have the authority to administer the sacrament of confirmation. They also have the authority to correct and discipline priests who fail in their duty to proclaim and live out the Christian faith. Bishops have the responsibility to ensure that the Catholic Christian faith is being taught accurately and authentically by the priests in their diocese. This means they must advise, visit and counsel the priests, as well as stay in regular communication with the laity of the diocese. Now to return to two things I mentioned earlier in passing: cardinals and the Magisterium. Cardinals are very senior bishops selected to have significant responsibilities. Most cardinals are selected to have responsibility over a larger collection of dioceses, often grouped by country. For example, Cardinal Vincent Nichols was selected in 2014 by Pope Francis to be a cardinal and to lead the Catholic Church in England and Wales. Some cardinals are selected to have responsibility for a particular area of the Church's work. For example, George Pell, who was originally Archbishop of Sydney, was selected in 2014 to work at the Vatican in Rome and to lead the Secretariat for the Economy, which works looking after the finances of the Catholic Church. Together, the Pope and the College of Cardinals form what is called the Magisterium. This is the decision-making body of the Church and is responsible for interpreting the teachings of the Church for the lives of Christians today. For example, there are many issues that Christians face today that are not dealt with in the Bible, simply because they did not exist. For example, should a Christian today support the use of genetic engineering? It is never mentioned in the Bible for the obvious reason that it didn't exist. It is the responsibility of the Magisterium to interpret the teachings of Jesus and the Apostles, reflecting on the teachings of the Church throughout the years, and prayerfully provide counsel and guidance for Christians to navigate these issues today. The Magisterium provides the ultimate definitive understanding of the Church's teaching, which it does by the publishing of the Catechism, which is the official teachings of the Catholic Church. I found it useful to help understand the church hierarchy by comparing it with something that many of you will be familiar with, a school hierarchy. Most schools are led by a headmaster. The headmaster usually has a small group of deputy or assistant head teachers who together form what is often called a leadership group or senior leadership team. They have both authority and responsibility over the running of the school. Below the leadership group, there are heads of department, for example the head of English, the head of maths, the head of RE, etc. They have responsibility over the individual teachers in their department. The teachers have responsibility for what happens in their classroom and looking after their students. In the Church, there is the Pope, who is like the headmaster. The cardinals are the equivalent of the assistant head teachers. Collectively, the Pope and cardinals form the Magisterium, which is like the leadership group in a school. The bishops, who have oversight over a number of churches, are basically the heads of a diocese, just like the heads of department in a school. The teachers are the equivalent of a priest, having responsibility for a specific classroom, like a priest who is responsible for a specific church or parish. And finally, the students are like the laity, the ordinary people who make up the majority of the organisation. Now, some of you might have a board of governors in your school who are over and above the headmaster and the leadership group. They ultimately guide the headmaster, although don't get involved with the day-to-day running of the school. Well, in the Church, if we really want to keep this comparison going, we could consider the Trinity to be like the board of governors who sit over and above the Pope. One final quick technical note. One of the key terms for this unit is the word papacy. Some of the textbooks define this simply as the office of the Pope. This phrase can be a bit confusing as it seems to imply the papacy is an actual physical room with a desk and a computer where the Pope sits and does his work. Actually, the word office is being used to refer to a position of authority rather than a physical room. It might be helpful to compare it with another position of authority. We can refer to the Queen as the monarch, but we can also say that she has the authority of the monarchy. The word monarchy refers to the authority of the position without referring to a specific king or queen. Similarly, the word papacy refers to the authority of the head of the church without referring to a specific pope. So pope is to papacy as monarch is to monarchy. Thanks for watching. I've been Mr. McMillan. That's the end of part 3. Please remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up and follow me on Twitter at MrMcMillanREvis. And remember, as always, you can also download an audio version of this video from iTunes.